All right, we're good.
Okay. We made it, kind of.
Yeah. Here we are.
Here we are for the second installment of
Yes.
Drink with Amy.
Yes.
I got my hair cut. I'm not quite sure what I'm doing with it yet.
It looks good. Looks good.
Thanks.
Yeah.
I decided to go short-ish again because why not?
Why not, indeed?
Short hair girl. So what are you drinking?
So, two things I should say. One is that I am in a undisclosed location, which I will keep undisclosed for the moment, where I'm actually not supposed to have alcohol. And
Yes.
I am, yeah, not your father's root beer.
Nice.
Because it's delicious. And it's like, so growing up was now that I can have like adult root beer and feel like a kid, but also feel like an adult. It's kind of a thing for me.
Yeah, and is it okay to say what type of area you're in? I think it would explain.
Location.
I think understanding how remote your location is would help explain the connectivity problems. Just a thought. Because now you're totally frozen.
Yes. I have the video.
Okay, well, Derrick is frozen. I don't really know what that means for everyone at home, but I am drinking my pink bubbly once again because all I had to do was...
So seeing.
Yeah, are you there? Can I hear you?
I'm still here. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I can hear you. But you're intermittent. So I'm just talking about what I'm drinking.
Okay, what are you drinking?
I'm drinking pink bubbly because
Excellent.
it doesn't require me to mix anything.
Nice.
I was thinking it's 87 degrees here right now, which is unbelievably warm for San Francisco.
Yeah.
And so if it looks like I'm sweating, it's because I am. Because no one here has air conditioning.
Yeah.
And what is normally a wind tunnel down my street is nothing. There's no wind. I don't know if you can see it behind me. Probably not. But the gay pride rainbow flag, the big one that lives in the Castro, is right here behind me. And it's not blowing in the wind at all.
Which is weird for San Francisco in April.
We usually have, it's usually warm, like really in the 80s, like upper 70s, 80s for a week in March.
Okay.
So just a little late to it this year.
Okay.
So it's not that unusual. It's just kind of extreme. So, yeah.
So I'm on the opposite end weather-wise.
Yeah. Is it snowing?
I'm up in the mountains. There's still snow on the ground, and it's cold, and I hate it. I hate the cold.
And are you in a climate-controlled environment?
I am. So I'm not freezing. I'm actually a little warm, but
yeah.
You know.
So if you hear road noise, it's because my windows are open because it's hot.
Okay. Well, so far so good.
So my apologies. So what are we talking about today? Let me look at.
So we were. Do you have it there?
Yep.
Okay.
Yes. So the question we're exploring today is, and no one was able to join us for this conversation in the Hangout, so we're just gonna go for it ourselves here.
Yeah, why not?
But basically, the question we're exploring today is, how does your understanding of success affect your spiritual emotional health? And that question sort of has to do with what can be an internal conflict between sort of societal, cultural definitions of success and what success feels like for us personally.
Yeah.
So Derrick, when you hear the word success, what comes to mind?
So I think so often.
Of us, so we can take all the time.
I know. This is great. I think when I think of success, so first and foremost, I think of like accomplishing measurable things. Like I achieved this score on this test, or I sold this number of product, or I lost this amount of weight, or I ran this number of miles, or whatever.
It's quantifiable.
Exactly. Whatever your measurable, whatever your metric for success is. I think the problem that I'm finding in my life, and I think that a lot of people are finding in their lives, is that once you get to a certain level of success where you have a couple of measurable wins, it feels like the goalpost keeps moving, and you have to keep succeeding, and you have to keep like upping that number to continue to be considered a success. And it feels like success is actually kind of a draining thing. And then you start to really question, like, is that thing I'm doing, is this actually success? And then you start to, what I've found in my life, where I'm starting to get in my life, is defining success by things that aren't quite as measurable, which is frustrating because measurable, which is awesome, and that makes them easy, because at least you can say I hit the mark or I didn't hit the mark. But when you start like measuring success by how kind you are, or how compassionate you are, or how good a friend you are, or how good a father you are in my case, or things that are a little less concrete, and all of a sudden success feels a lot trickier and a lot more elusive. But you also realize that you're measuring, quote unquote, measuring things that have real value and real worth. So that's kind of my rambly answer to your initial question. How about you? How do you define success?
I tend to replace the word success with satisfaction.
Okay.
So, success it feels kind of ambiguous to me. Like I successfully paid all my bills this month, or I did not.
Yeah.
Like that's something, and that's clear. But when it comes to like, am I a successful person, or, that's when it's like, if I ask myself, am I successful? Then I start comparing myself to other people. And of course the answer is always going to be no.
Yeah.
If I start comparing myself to other people, because there's always going to be someone more successful than me according to sort of societal standards. And at the same time, there are a lot of people who aren't as successful as me according to societal standards. So at the same time, I'm yes successful and no successful. and not like, yes, I'm successful and no, I'm not successful. And that's just like, you're successful to the degree that you're not a failure.
Right.
And that just seems really limiting to me, because most of the time I'm on 2 points at the same spectrum, right? If we have success and failure, well, if I compare myself to Bill Gates, I'm like failure status. But if I compare
try not to do.
I mean, you know, and if I compare myself, this is all by society's norms, of course.
Sure.
And then if I compare myself to like someone who's really down on their luck and like wandering around the Tenderloin talking to themselves, well, I'm pretty successful.
Right.
And that's a really big spectrum.
Yeah, it's huge.
And it's binary.
Yeah.
And my experience is more complicated than that and more complex than that. And so I have chosen to shift my focus from comparing myself to other people with staying checked in with my level of satisfaction in the moment. And that's not just like a hedonistic kind of Rolling Stones satisfaction kind of thing. It's more of a it's a spiritual sense, and it's an energetic sense, and it's contentment and internal peace and confidence, and just knowing that, you know what, there are goals that I haven't reached, and I'm doing everything I can to reach them. And today that has to be enough.
Yeah.
Because no matter how I feel about it, at the end of the day, God is still there. The divine is still there. Spirit is still there telling me that I'm worthy of all of the good that is there. So again, success, I've kind of had to take myself out of that trap, so to speak.
Yeah. I think the word that you said that is like jumping out at me right now is the word enough. Like part of what I think is really insidious about our definitions of success at times is that when do you have enough? When do you have enough accolades? When you have enough accomplishments? When you have enough money? When you have enough degrees? When you have enough followers? When you have enough fans? When you have enough whatever? And at some point, not only do you have to say, like, not only do I have enough, but I am enough. And to some extent, that being enough is where success comes from. So let me ask you this kind of as a follow-up then. Like, how has your definition of success
It's getting hotter by the minute.
Oh, silly San Francisco with
by now the fog should have rolled in and it should be like 55 degrees.
When we have more of a budget, we'll get you a fan.
I have a fan. I'm afraid it's too loud though. I'll turn it on. It doubles as a heater.
Nice.
So it has a fan setting and then 2 heat settings, and now I'm using it as a fan. Nice. This is the first time in 2 years that I've used it as a fan. Anyway, sorry, you had a follow-up question.
Let me see if I can remember it. How have you in your own personal life, but maybe even also in the folks that you interact with in spiritual direction, how does the understanding of what is or what is not success affect their spiritual and emotional lives, or your spiritual and emotional life?
Yeah. The first... Stop it. The first word that comes to mind is the word pressure. And the second word that comes to mind is stress. And it's like perpetually striving and sort of struggling and kind of like clawing your way to the next level of whatever it is you're in. We put a ton of pressure on ourselves to succeed. And there's so much fear of failure.
Yeah.
And so, you know, folks, and I mean, I am totally guilty of this too. You know, it's like I don't know if the fear happens first or the pressure happens, or if the pressure happens first, but it's like you feel this pressure to do well. And then that immediately triggers this fear that you're not going to do well. And then that fear that you're not going to do well immediately turns catastrophic.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
If I don't meet this deadline, I'm not getting into grad school. And if I don't get into grad school, I'm never going to make more money. And if I don't make more money, I'm never going to be able to have a family. And then I'm going to die alone and sad next to my cat.
Right. Yes.
So suddenly, pressure to do well on a grad school application becomes I'm going to die sad and alone.
With your cat.
With a cat.
Which seems to not be, you know, like company enough for people, but I don't understand that.
I mean, I think it's better to have the cat there, probably.
I agree.
You know,
I love my cat.
But maybe if you had like 25 cats around you, maybe not. Like that, you may have a organ problem.
I think when you get to the place where you think you're going to die alone and be eaten by cats, that's the problem. No
one's going to find your body for 6 months. Like,
yeah, exactly.
And then they're going to have to do like dental records and DNA to figure out who you are. Meanwhile, the world has kept turning and no one missed you. Like, this is sort of the dark side of our big, beautiful, capable, imaginative, creative brains.
Right. Yes.
Right? Instead of going, oh, I'm feeling this pressure to get this grad school application done, I'm going to engage my imagination and my creativity to make it as kick-ass as I can.
Right.
We go into fear and like paralysis of, oh my gosh, I'm going to die sad and alone.
Yeah.
And so, you know, success and our orientation to success, our definitions of success, our internalization of that. So what tends to happen is even if we've released ourselves from external standards of success, they can still be operating in the background.
Yeah.
And you can feel the pressure, and it feels like the pressure is coming from yourself when really it's coming from that third grade teacher who told you, you know, if you didn't get a good job,
yeah,
you'd, I don't know, end up in prison, or I don't know, like whatever. Like,
I mean, that's real.
Yeah. And as kids, we absorb and interpret things in very interesting ways. But, you know, I mean, I had the best third grade teacher ever. So I didn't have that experience, but it's just an example. Like, so, I mean, like a real life example for me happened in seminary. So it's sort of success, but it's, anyway. So I was in my second semester of seminary. I was in the MDiv program in preparation to be ordained clergy. And I had wanted to be ordained since I was 17. In church camp, at church camp, the summer before my senior year of high school. The summer before my senior year of high school. So I just finished my junior year. I was leading a prayer at worship at church camp, and I just had this huge like revelation kind of experience where I suddenly felt called into ministry, and everything that had ever happened in my life made sense.
Yeah, been there.
Everything just clicked into focus, and it was like, yes, this is it. So, you know, I was 17 at the time, and I still had my senior year of high school plus 4 years of undergrad.
Right.
to do before I could get into seminary.
Right.
So we're 6 years post-calling, and I'm going, wait a minute. I know what I'm called to do, and the ordination committee that I'm talking with seems to be operating under a different definition than me.
Yeah.
And I had a choice to make at that point. I mean, it was further complicated by the fact that I was called to do arts ministry in a particular way, and I needed certain education in order to do that, and the MDiv program was not providing that.
Yeah.
So, you know, in order to get the best education for what I was called to do, which is arts ministry, I had to really discern and consider whether or not getting that education was worth giving up the MDiv and the ordination track of things. And so, you know, I'd held this picture in my brain for 6 years. I'm going to be a minister. I'm a future minister. Like, I was a theater major, and people would ask me all the time, well, what are you going to do with your theater degree? And I was like, I'm going to seminary. Like, imagine being at a bar, right? With a glass in your hand, and you're like 21, and you're like, oh, I'm going to be a minister. Meanwhile, these frat boys are like, what? So, you know, I really had to dig down deep, because all of my professors were like, if you switch out of this program, it's death to your ordination and all this stuff. And it was really hard for me not to feel like a complete failure. Like I'd given up on this dream that I'd had for so long and that I had been working toward every single day. And there was this voice that kept saying, like, but there's more.
Yeah. There's
more to this.
Yeah.
And, you know, the education is more important than anything else. And it was kind of like, I just felt this sense of like, you were ordained that day at church camp.
Yeah.
Almost like God was saying, you're already ordained.
Yeah.
You know, I called you, I anointed you, I ordained you in that moment.
Yeah.
And all of the rest of this doesn't matter. Like, it's just people.
Yeah.
Doing what people do.
Yeah.
And it was like I felt like I had to choose between like what the institution was asking of me and what the Spirit was asking of me, what God was asking of me. And that was a really difficult decision.
Yeah.
And it took me a while to like do that, to make that choice and not also take on and carry the burden of the failure of it.
Yeah.
Because there were a lot of people who really didn't understand that decision.
Yeah.
And who judged it kind of harshly. And I was just like, this isn't about you. You know? I mean, at the time I was 23.
Yeah.
I was like, I have a lot of time to get ordained.
Yeah.
And if that's, you know, ever something that needs to happen, I have faith that it will happen.
Yeah.
You know, so I could have let the fear of failure and sort of the fear of the other voices in my life influence my choice, but I didn't. Ultimately, I was able to separate myself from them and really listen to my own heart and my own sense of calling and the voice of the Spirit in my own life.
Yeah.
And that was intensely difficult. It's still, I mean, there's still grief.
Yeah, I know it.
Around that. So Grief more so that the picture that I had in my brain was impossible.
Yeah.
It was a dream.
Yeah.
And it wasn't going to be reality in the way that I had expected.
Yeah.
Right? Success and expectation are very closely entwined.
And that can be external expectations, external.
Yep.
Or it can be your own sense of internal expectations of what things are supposed to look like and what you should be doing, what you ought to be about and putting your energy into.
Yeah, and it can be a challenge to just stay present in the moment and accept the moment as it is, rather than trying to force your situation to match your expectation of that.
Yep.
It's like going into a social situation or something like that. It's like you go out with friends and in your mind you're like, okay, we're going to get dressed up and we're going to have tons of fun and it's going to be like an epic night. It's like you get to the place and the music sucks and it's expensive and your feet hurt because your shoes are impractical and like it's just like major opportunity for disappointment and failure.
Sure.
Or you can be present to the good that is there.
Yeah.
And let yourself have that, because ultimately you're not in control of what the music's going to be, and you're not you can't really negotiate the price of your drink.
No, that nenever works.
And the only pair of shoes you have with you are the shoes on your feet. So yeah. I don't have any expectations, no. But anyway, is there a time like that for you that comes up where you really had to kind of dig down deep into your own heart and say no to what external success looked like, or say yes to a perceived failure or something like that?
Yeah, I mean, so when I think of this idea of success and failure, like I have to go back to my first full-time ministry position, my first full-time pastorate. Tiny little church in Central Ohio. When I got there, they were hemorrhaging money, and when they hired me, they said, in 3 years, we're either going to be something different or we're going to be something dead. And my expectation for myself was that I could save this church, whatever saving looks like, that I could help them turn it around. And the real clash of expectations was between myself, this idea of what this church was going to look like, revitalized, re-energized as a community church that did good things in the community, that reached out to its neighbors, that was actively involved with young people and actively seeking after diversity. And this congregation's expectations, which were that I would stick around long enough to do their funerals. I mean, that was their expectation, was that I would marry, maybe, but more often than not bury the people who were there, and I would visit people in the hospital, and I did do that, but like they weren't looking to change at all. And they just kind of thought that, enough people would die and leave the church money and they would be fine. And that was a really difficult situation, because I failed, quote unquote, failed by my standard, which was saving this church, turning it around, helping them to realize what I thought they should be as a church.
Mm-hmm.
And the reality is, for the time that I was there, I did the things, and I had to, what was difficult for me and what I still wrestle with is the fact that my hope for what success was going to look like in this church was not the same as the people's success, and their view of success. And that's when we think about the emotional and like ramifications of that, when we own, as much as I hate to disappoint other people's standards, when I have an expectation, and this sounds very similar to you, when I have my own dream, my own goal for what things are going to look like, and I come up short of my own standards, that's when I really struggle. And I think it's one of those things. I think we in the church, we in the spiritual community, I think we say, okay, we're not in whatever it is we're doing for money. We're not in it for fame. Most of us, we're not in it for money or fame or notoriety or whatever. But we definitely do have our own internal metrics of success.
Yeah.
And when we fall short of those internal metrics, it's the feeling of, not only am I failing the church, not only am I failing myself, but I'm also in some way I'm failing God too.
Yeah.
And like, I didn't succeed at my call. I didn't succeed at what God wanted me to do. And that's such a heavy thing to carry around with you, like that is crazy making.
Yeah.
And I think that there are more than a few of our, and I count myself among them, but I think there are more than a few of our peers who have carried that weight around with them, that like, I have failed on all these different levels, the personal, the professional, the spiritual, and somehow above all of those things, I failed God. And that's just like devastating.
Yeah.
That's absolutely devastating.
Yeah.
So like, I don't know, what's the solution to this? I mean, what's the solution to having these? I mean, we can't. The solution is not no standards. The solution is not nothing by which we can measure ourselves or base our performance.
Yes. So there's a process that I sort of coach my spiritual direction clients into, which is shifting away from expectation and into intention. So that walking into a room, you have a particular intention of, I'm going to meet new people, or I'm going to have an open mind, or I'm going to exude confidence. Or, so that it's like, okay, what is my purpose in this moment? What is the purpose of walking into this room or being in this moment? I intend to walk into this party and just relax. No matter who's there, no matter what's happening, this is my downtime. And I'm going to relax and enjoy the good that is there.
Yeah.
Like, that's when I set an intention like that, it's almost like a spiritual chiropractic adjustment. Like everything just, as soon as I set that intention, everything just kind of aligns. Like my mind is on board and supporting that intention. My body's on board and supporting that intention. And I'm not preoccupied. I can be present in the moment. I'm not preoccupied by trying to create this particular picture. I can check in at any moment with myself and discern and determine and feel whether my feeling matches my intention or not. And then go, oh, I intended to be open-minded. And you know what? I'm really judging all of these people up in here. So you know what? My criticizer is on full blast. I'm just going to drop that down and let that go. And you know what? That girl whose voice is really annoying, you know, she's really, you know, she's wearing a really cute necklace. And like, you know, I'm just going to have an open mind about that. Okay. Like I definitely have judgments about it, and I could continue to have my judgments about it. And I have the choice to drop down deeper than the place of judgment into the place of appreciation and observation, to either be neutral, on the side of positive. And I use social situations because it feels like, you know, when you're just hanging out with other people, like when you go to work, the idea is that you're working with these people toward a common goal, and you have that in common with each other. And when you just go to a party or like a dinner or something, like you may or may not know people, you know, it's really easy to let all of your insecurities sort of rule your choices.
Yeah.
And so again, like before you walk into the space, go, okay, I'm going to relax. Or this is my opportunity to hang out and learn what I can about these people. Right? So that my intention is clear in my own body. And then my mind goes into a support mode rather than an analysis mode.
So how would you, I like that a lot. How would you take that same framework into the professional realm, where so much of our success failure narrative gets played out?
Yeah. So for me, in my own spiritual direction practice, like there are definitely the goals that I have to meet. And if I don't meet a goal and I notice myself starting to beat myself up about it, I can take a deep breath and I can sort of zoom out. So if I zoom in on just that goal and whether or not I achieved that goal, that's, you know, and I didn't achieve the goal, I can feel pretty bad about that pretty quickly. Yeah. But if I sort of zoom out and look at that goal in the broader context of who I am and my own life, that's where I can begin to have some compassion for myself. And I can begin to say, okay, you didn't meet the goal of posting 3 blog posts this month, or you didn't meet the goal of onboarding 2 new clients this month. But you know what? You made dinner for your family every single night. Or you still paid the bills. Or, you know, this car trouble came up and you had to research auto garages and make those appointments and then drop off the car and then pick up the car. And that was a whole day.
Yeah.
You know, so it's like zooming out and looking at the bigger picture is like, oh, you know, I didn't reach that goal. but look at all the other stuff that I did.
Yeah.
And that's absolutely valuable as well.
Yeah. And I think that's an element of I've been working on this. This has been like sort of my major self-work focus has been self-compassion. And
Yes.
so often when we do evaluations of ourselves, we are so good at pointing out all the things that we didn't do, or all the things that we didn't do up to standard, or all the things that we didn't do up to expectations, whether real or imagined.
Mm-hmm.
And we're so good at it. I managed this myriad of tasks, every day, and I juggle these numerous roles every day. And kudos to myself for navigating each of those situations and each of those obstacles and circumstances that may throw themselves at me each and every day. We're awful at that. We're so bad. I mean, we're so as judgy as we can be towards other people. We are so the self-criticism, particularly when it feels like we're in a place where we're judging our own successes or failures, can be so brutal. When we actually take the time to love ourselves and be compassionate with ourselves, and to really refocus some energy, and reframe
Yep.
on those little things that we do every day that that are those little triumphs. We have dozens and dozens of little triumphs every day, and sometimes it is about like really celebrating very small things to say, okay, today I did a handful of I fed myself, fed my family, got from point A to point B, and today that's
enough.
we'll get back at it again.
Yep. Yeah, so I just posted a link in the Facebook event, a link to a book that is it's like a book that's about this big.
Okay.
Like it's a pocket edition of a book by Pema Chodron called Awakening Loving Kindness.
Nice.
And it's a combination of...
I love her.
Yeah, so it's a book that comes out of a series of meditations and sort of lectures, like talks that she did. And it's really great because it's easy to read because she was originally speaking.
Mm-hmm.
And it's full of both practical and sort of theoretical pieces. So it's really, really, really nice. And it's kind of required reading for my spiritual direction clients. So I highly recommend that book. It's, it's fairly inexpensive. I'm sure you could pick it up used on Amazon. But that's like, yeah, cultivating self-kindness and loving kindness toward yourself it can be a real challenge, and we're so much quicker to extend that to other people. And, just to get kind of theological about this for a second, like that's biblically driven.
Mm.
And that comes straight out of the theological history of Christianity. Like Christ was nailed to a cross on behalf of other people.
Yeah.
So it's like, there's that piece of the Christ story that becomes justification in a way for us to extend more kindness to other people than we do to ourselves.
Yeah, that's really true.
I don't believe that that's like the purpose of the crucifixion. But the crucifixion story has been used to
oppress and dominate other peoples and other cultures, and it has been used as a tool of empire. So I don't think we can really talk about success and our own pressures on ourselves to succeed and our own ability to extend more kindness to other people than to ourselves without recognizing that there is sort of a biblical, theological, historical root to that.
Yeah. And
that's more of an inherited mindset or an inherited pattern. It's kind of a spiritual inheritance, if you will, for those of us who are in the Christian tradition. And I know I've had to do my own work around that to release myself from martyrdom. Because there's also a history of pastors as martyrs.
Yes.
Like, not necessarily physical. I mean, yes, there are definitely physical martyrs, but there's sort of this martyr complex or like a martyrdom mentality that is pretty common, I think, in the pastoral tradition. So, just acknowledging that and naming that and letting it be in the conversation, I think, is important.
Well, and I think, and it's really good that you named that, because I think that theological underpinning drives so many of us, and drives a lot of people in helping professions, whether they understand it as theological or not.
Mm-hmm.
But this idea of self-sacrifice is sort of the highest virtue.
Yeah.
And sacrificing for others at the expense of your own self.
Mm-hmm.
And I was at a lecture yesterday with a Jewish scholar, talking about the commandment to love your neighbor as yourself, and sort of the Talmudic on that. Really do you emphasize the self-love piece of that so often, it actually assumes a worldview in which you love yourself, and we de-emphasize that. I think we almost see that as like, well, no, that's reading something in the scripture that's not there. But our Jewish brothers and sisters say, no, that's absolutely there. The understanding that you love yourself, and that's the grounding from which you are able to love others. And you can't actually love others without. And I think that's something that we would do well to remember and begin to cultivate in our own lives. Yeah. That sense of self-love and like, if we're going to love our neighbor as ourselves, we have to really ask ourselves, how do I love myself? And the things that I say to myself in my own head, would I say them to other people? Odds for me.
And would you want other people to say them to you? Absolutely not. And if somebody else said to you what you're saying some of the things I say, yeah, you'd probably punch them in the face. Like, you'd go Donald Trump on them. You'd be like, I'm gonna punch you. I'm gonna sue you. Right? You'd probably get pretty violent. I don't know, maybe. Unless you're like full-on pacifist or something, and that's a whole other deal. Yeah. But really, like, I feel that I was also just thinking about like prosperity gospel and the ways that sort of Christ's sacrifice has been used to manipulate people, and the way that, like, with prosperity gospel, it's like, well, if you're making money and you're thriving financially, then that means God loves you. And if you're not, that means you've done something horribly wrong and you have to atone for that somehow. And it's just like, wow, Wow.
Yeah.
Like, all right, that's capitalism.
Sure, but it's
Plus Christianity.
ish.
Yeah. Well, it's one interpretation of the biblical scripture
Sure.
plus capitalism.
Yes. Yeah.
And I mean, wasn't Jesus like anti-capitalism?
Well, yes.
I mean,
Yes, he was.
yeah, pretty much.
Yeah, basically.
Yeah.
But I've seen firsthand. I grew up in a prosperity gospel church, and I've watched people equate their financial success with their own faithfulness,
and their own self-worth and how much God loves them. And it's just like, whoa.
You can't do that.
You're putting conditions on something that is actually unconditional.
Yeah. And it's just it's awful. Like, it's really awful. Like, when we begin to make a commodity of God's love and God's grace that is similar to the other we see in the world that we're working so hard to achieve, we get into some really, really nasty stuff that's really harmful and really toxic to people.
Yes. It keeps abused people abused, and it keeps oppressed people oppressed. And like, there's a whole theology about liberation, and that Christ came to liberate us from oppression. And, I mean, I feel like the primary spiritual epidemic in this country is consumerism and greed. And it will be sort of, I mean, we've already seen the effect of it, right? I just watched The Big Short, like the housing crisis in 2008. Like, that's a direct result of greed. The Panama Papers were just leaked. Like, more examples of greed leading to corruption and corruption leading to greed. And to me, those are not righteous values.
No.
And every sort of Christian minister or preacher who preaches prosperity gospel and manipulates people out of money, like, it just makes my stomach turn.
Yeah.
Because I'm like, you're embodying the opposite of Christ right now.
Yeah.
In the name of Christ. And that's unacceptable.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it makes the work so much harder for people like you and me who are sharing a different message.
Yeah.
And so then you get into like, okay, well, at what point does loving myself become selfish?
Right.
And I've held this belief for a very long time that, like, I have the rights that I have until those rights infringe upon the rights of others.
Yeah.
And then I have no right to them anymore.
Exactly.
I think I was in like 5th grade when I articulated that. Like, really, like, it's not so complicated. I was still in elementary school. So it's not that complicated.
It really is simple when you get down to it.
Yes. And some of the simplest things are the most challenging to embody.
Absolutely.
So, so I feel like we should probably wrap up.
Yeah. It's a good place. It's a good place to go.
Excellent conversation.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Appreciate it.
Yeah. Good. This is good. What stuff do you have going on that you can tell people about? Anything?
Yeah. So this weekend I'm leading worship at the annual gathering of the Christian Church Disciples of Christ, Northern California, Nevada.
Nice.
Mm-hmm. And they may run me out on a rail afterward, but whatever. That's the risk of doing something new.
I doubt that. I kind of doubt that.
And then, so that's this weekend up in Sacramento. And then next weekend on Sunday, Sanctuary for the Arts, we're having our monthly Sacred Space in San Francisco.
Nice.
And beyond that, I do have openings in my spiritual direction practice. I'm always on the search for new clients. And if you go to my website, which is amydianeshoemaker.com, there is a place for you to schedule a free consultation appointment where we can just have a chat about where you are spiritually, what spiritual direction might be able to do for you, and then specifically how my approach is, well, specifically more about my approach and whether or not it would be a good fit. So there are all of those things.
Awesome. So
How
I
about
mentioned,
you?
yeah, I mentioned in the last show that I'm working on this study, basically a Bible study for Kendrick Lamar's fantastic album, To Pimp a Butterfly. So I've finally settled on the format of that. That's going to start April 18th, the week of April 18th. What I'm going to do, last year I went on what was basically a digital retreat where I had access to the blog and was able to do some readings throughout the day, kind of at my own pace, and then engage in the online conversation. So that's basically what I'm going to do with this, is like have a week-long digital retreat. So I'm going to put more information about that on the Facebook event. You can reach me at dweston80@gmail.com. You can find me at Twitter, Derrick at Derrick L. Weston, if you have more questions about that. But that's going to be starting April 18th. And that's going to be an online retreat, where it's a week-long online retreat to study To Pimp a Butterfly. And there's also going to be like written material, PDFs and whatnot produced from that.
And can you put the link to that in the Drinks with Amy?
I certainly will.
That would be awesome.
I do that. Yes. And then, so when are we going to do episode 3?
2 weeks.
2 weeks?
Yeah. So we're on an every other week sort of cycle.
I kind of like that.
Awesome. Yeah. So same time, same place. Eventually we'll tighten up our technology and actually start at 7.
Yeah. And I usually won't be in the mountains.
Yeah. Well, this time was my fault. Google Plus is the most confusing thing ever. So,
yes. But it's free, so.
Yeah, like I'm all about that. But like, can it be free and easy to use? Is that asking too much? Yes. Like, doesn't Google have some of the most brilliant minds around or something?
Yes, and maybe some of them are watching and will help us with our tech problems. I don't know. Hi, Google.
That'd be great. Yeah. But in the meantime,
Yeah. In the meantime, 2 weeks, April 20th. We'll be here.
So many motorcycles. Get out of here. Sorry.
Yeah, I've got the opposite problem. Just too much.
You're going to bed. You're going to go to bed tonight. You're going to be like,
it's so quiet.
Hopefully you don't watch The Walking Dead.
I do, actually. So now I'm
Whoops.
a little freaked out. Yeah.
Good luck with that one.
Yeah.
Maybe you can go dig around and forage for some valerian root.
Like I do.
Yeah. I mean, why not? You have a flashlight on your phone.
I do.
And no cell service anyway, so.
Right. So it's basically just a flashlight. Right.
Oh, goodness gracious. Well,
thank you.
Thank you.
This was fun.
Yeah.
Yes.
And for those of you out there, if any of you want to get involved in the Hangout and be part of the discussion, just let us know. Again, Derrick just gave you his email address. I am amydianeshoemaker@gmail.com, and we also have drinkswithamy@gmail.com. We're also on Facebook and Twitter and all kinds of things. So figure it out. We're available. Come on. Yeah, because we would love to have more people in the conversation. So be on the lookout on Facebook for the topic for next time.
Yeah.
And we will see you then.
All right.
All
Bye,
right.
Amy.
Bye.